Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon and spending your next hour with us to discuss a little bit about how do you link HR metrics to business strategy and outcomes. My name is Joe Lavigny. I'm the Director of Training and Development at Capsim Management Simulations, and I'll be going through this webinar with you today. Just to give you a little idea, at the end of the webinar, and if you stayed on for the entire length of the webinar, we will send you out an email with your code to receive your HRCI 1 credit hour. So look for that email coming from a capsim.com email. You'll receive that from us, but you'll need to make sure that you stay on the webinar from beginning to end in order to receive that credit. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start by telling you a little story. We're going to focus a little bit about today regarding what it's really all about. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it's all about with me, and that's my family. I've got a little picture up there of my wife and my two daughters, and my little guy, he's 3 years old. We were on a little trip here last summer. Last summer, we were in a focus for my oldest daughter there. She's on the left right next to my wife. She was on her college venture trips and trying to figure out where she was going to be going to school this upcoming fall. So she's in her senior year, just about finishing up. Great student, excellent grades, and she's interested in going into a pre-med kind of program. So on this trip, we happened to be down at St. Louis University, and she really liked the place when we were down there. She liked the culture, she liked the environment, she liked the offerings that they had, the outcomes that they had talked about that their students had received, and all of that kind of thing. But while we were there, my daughter mentioned to me, hey, Dad, there's a couple other schools I want to go to, and some of them are out on the East Coast. Now, we're from Chicago, so St. Louis and Midwest schools were easy trips for us to take, but she said, hey, I'm really interested in Boston University. And I said, wow, that's a whole nother trip that we're going to have to figure out how we can get you on. So I thought about it for a little bit. I did some research on Boston U. It looked like a good school, but man, it sure was expensive compared to some of the other schools that we were looking at. But she really wanted to go check it out, and I thought it's only fair to look at all of your options when you're trying to make a good decision. Right about that time, I had an invitation for our organization to come out to a conference in Boston, the Human Capital Institute conference. And I thought, well, now, why don't we attend this? It'll be a great opportunity for me to learn a little bit more about what CEOs and senior human resource and learning and development leaders think. I can bring my daughter with, and she can go visit Boston U and a couple other schools that she was interested out east, and it'll be kind of a win-win trip for everybody. So we went out on that trip. She got to go visit Boston U, and I went to my conference. While I was at my conference, I was listening to leaders like Kimo Kippen from Marriott talking about leadership and development and his view as a chief learning officer. And while I'm listening to some of these leaders talk, I'm getting texts from my daughter who's telling me, hey, Dad, I really, really like it here. This is great. I really like Boston. I'm loving Boston. I really like Boston U so far. And I'm starting to get a little nervous because I know what this school costs. And at this point, she hasn't even applied yet, and I'm starting to get nervous. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen. She's thinking the culture is kind of what she wants, the city environment, and she's really liking the program that they have to offer, and I'm getting more and more nervous. And then all of a sudden, on stage, pops up this guy. He was an Australian guy, and it turns out he's the CEO of WD-40, and man, did he grab my attention away from texting back and forth with my daughter. He grabbed my attention so much because he was probably the most engaging speaker I have ever heard. He's got this Australian accent, he's very animated and extremely passionate. Three things that can really help out in a presentation. But where he really got me was not just by his style of presenting, is what he was talking about. So up to this point, I had heard chief learning officers and senior HR officers come up and talk a lot about learning and development and leadership within their organization and what they believed. But this was the first CEO that came up and talked. And what Gary told us that day was very interesting, is that he believes it's really all about engagement at an organization, and he believes that business results all come from engagement. So if we take a look at something he said, engagement equals productivity, that equals business results. So what he said was find a way to engage your people. They'll want to come to work, they'll want to be more productive, and they'll want to achieve their business results and help you achieve business results. Now, he credits all of the business results at WD-40 over the last 5 years truly to engagement, not to innovation, not to a lot of other things. He takes it all the way back to the engagement step within the process. He went on to show us some 5-year stock results that he attributed to people living the values and the culture of WD-40, which really got them engaged in the first place. This is the stock chart that he showed us. It's a 5-year stock chart. 5 years ago, he showed us that the stock for WD-40 was hovering right around the $40 to $50 mark. When they basically instituted a tribal culture within their organization at WD-40, the stock price started to slowly peak up. He noticed people were more engaged, becoming more productive, all the way to the point where it got the stock up to about $125 a share. And he believes this was truly because of the tribal culture that he instituted at WD-40. Now, we can think about the importance of culture at an organization, and if we go back to thinking about Jack Welch, the former CEO of GE, one of his most famous quotes was, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And Gary Ridge really believed that as well. So he instituted the tribal culture thing. Now, when we think about tribal culture, what you're looking at here is really groups of people that have similar values that make up this culture. He hires specifically off of what people's values and beliefs are, and will they be a good fit to the organization, and he'll take that over someone with massive amounts of experience any day. At least that's what he told us about. Now, what he thinks is that, hey, if you are part of these groups, you have this sense of belonging, that you really want to come to work and be with people that have the same values and beliefs that you do. And that leads to engagement, which leads to productivity and leads to business results. So let's take a step back here. That was a nice little story to share with you and kind of kick us off on engagement leading to business results. But I'll tell you a little bit about who we are at Capsim. Capsim Management Simulations has been around since 1985, and we're basically a leader in the business simulation and business training market. So we do a lot of work on the academic side of things, where our simulations that we created are used in over 100,000 or by 100,000 students in over 900 universities around the world to teach business acumen, strategy, all of that kind of thing. On my side of the business, I work on the corporate training side, and we use our simulations with Fortune 100 companies all the way down to small companies that you may never have heard of. The really neat thing that I get to do is talk with a lot of leaders at organizations about their leadership programs, about the business impacts they're trying to achieve, and how we can help them make these business impacts by training on business acumen, doing some leadership development work, strategy work, and even financial acumen. And when I get a chance to talk with these C-suite leaders, I really get to learn about what they need from their HR and their L&D people, and how those folks can help drive business impacts, even to the point where we've delivered specific business acumen programs for HR and L&D professionals. And we do it all with experiential learning. Now, what I'm going to do today is kind of share with you a little bit of some of that business acumen side of things for that HR and L&D professional, and that's kind of where our focus is going to go today. Here's a little list of some of the clients that we've worked with, just so you can see the experience over industries and different types of companies that we work with. So today we're going to cover some recent thought leader opinions on HR and L&D's impact on the business. We're going to explain how to create a competitive advantage through HR and learning and development. We're going to talk a little bit about examining the links between HR metrics to impact business results, and then propose some ideas for measuring return on some of those softer skills training things like leadership development. So let's jump right in. There was another conference that I was at where I got the opportunity to hear a gentleman named Klaus Havelt. He was the director of corporate learning at SimCorp, and his topic was on continuous learning and how that enables competitive advantage. Now, the really big thing here about competitive advantage is that when you start talking with senior leaders at your organization about how you can help on the L&D front with gaining a competitive advantage, you're going to get their attention. And I'll tell you why. Because most of those folks have obviously an MBA or further degrees, but at some point in time, they learned about a guy named Michael Porter. Michael Porter talks about strategy, and he's got a strategic theory out there about how you can gain competitive advantage. And he's got a book that's probably, I don't know, 1,200 to 1,500 pages long about gaining competitive advantage. And the gist of it is that, hey, he says to gain a competitive advantage, you can either be a differentiator and find a way to differentiate yourself, your organization, or your product, or you could be a cost leader. Those are his kind of two sides of looking at how you can gain competitive advantage over a client. Now, a lot of people take that and say, okay, I can differentiate my product by, making it a high outstanding product like an iPhone 7, or I can go and be a cost leader and come up with this generic telephone that I sell for a low cost and my margins are less. But it's not just about the product. There's other ways that Porter talks about that you can differentiate your organization. Maybe it's based on the efficiency side of things and how you can generate more profit within your organization, even with keeping the same sales revenue. You can also differentiate your organization based on the people itself. So if we look at what Klaus Havelt had done at SimCorp, what we see here is a way that he gained competitive advantage for his organization through continuous learning. So we're looking at really developing talent here. So Klaus put us through his model, and what he said was that you must have this kind of deep understanding of responsibility and importance of roles. Managers must have this obligation to develop their teams. So what he realized was that, hey, we have to have these competency profiles. Now, I'm sure a lot of you on this call have done job analysis or job design analysis before, and you figured out what skills are needed for that position in general. Now, Klaus takes this a little bit further for us, and I'm going to get into that for a minute, but the first step in his process was really to identify these competency profiles within the organization. The step that he took that most of us don't is that he took these standard profiles and linked them to the business strategy. Now that's very interesting, and I'm going to show you in just a minute how he did that, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. Once he had that link going, he then has developmental talks set up between either an HR business partner and that individual where they're in this safe setting to really talk about their career aspirations, their future desires. This is a little bit different than a regular review. That regular review is, hey, what did you do last year, Joe? These were the positive things. These are the things you can work on from last year. But this developmental talk is really looking forward to, what do I want to do at my organization? Now think about that. If you're sitting down with someone as an HR business partner and they're helping you guide your future, you're starting to become more engaged in that organization because you're really thinking that, hey, they want me to be here and I want to be here because I can get out of this organization what I want to and still help them grow as well. So you're setting the stage for that engagement level. Now the other thing that Klaus did was they set this all up on a supporting IT system, and they were able to make it a nice, easy system where you could click some skills, find out some development tactics you could do from there, look at some behaviors that match to that and all of that. We're not going to talk much about his supporting system. What we're going to talk about for the next couple of minutes is this competency profile idea and linking it to the business strategy of things. So if we look, we know that he took the skills and knowledge needed for each job. He went out and found out what those were by talking to different leaders in different functional areas and tried to link it to strategy. So I'm going to start with this list of 4 bullet points that I have here at the bottom. Skills and knowledge. You need to know what skills and knowledge are required for every job. And the more I can learn those skills or knowledge, I might be able to change a behavior within an employee. And hopefully that behavior change leads to a change in something that affects the department's strategy or the department's key performance indicators, and hopefully that affects the company's overall strategy and overall key performance indicators. Now we've got a lot of L&D folks on the call with us today, a lot of training folks on there, so this might look familiar to some of you. In fact, to me, it looked immediately when he popped it up like Kirkpatrick's model of evaluation. He's using it on the development side for employees, and he's basically taking it and saying, hey, if I can develop their skills and knowledge, that'll change the behaviors, that's going to lead to a business outcome. That's levels 2, 3, and 4 of Kirkpatrick. So we should all be familiar with that, but it's something to really think about, not just using it in the evaluation side, but using it in the development of our employees right up front when we think about talent development. Now, moving on a little bit, his development plan for the employees, well, what he said was that I want them to do everything through either living, through leading, or through learning it. 70% should be through actually, living it out there, and 20% should be actually, mentoring and coaching and helping others, and 10% should be actually that book learning that they might have to do. Now, again, my L&D friends on this call, does this look familiar to all of you? Because it sure did to me. It was the 70-20-10 model that now he's taking and using that 70-20-10 model of learning and applying it to the development plan. So his screen, basically, for each individual employee, on the top left side of the screen, it had all the skills that someone might need for a position. And you could talk with that employee about what skills they wanted to get on, improve upon, and they could click on a specific skill. And when they clicked that skill, it would give them some classes that they could take, which was that learning side of things. And then when all of a sudden over on the right side, it would fill in that 10% model of you're going to do this, this, and that. And then it would give them some ideas of how they might take that skill and knowledge and actually coach and mentor and work with others on it. And that would fill in the 20% side. And then it would also populate the 70% side, which was living it, what you could do with that skill and knowledge in your job that's going to affect a business outcome. It was really an interesting model and a different way of looking at a talent development side. And again, by doing this, you're actually affecting a business outcome within an organization by creating engagement in your team and in your employees, because you're giving them this idea that, hey, the company's helping me grow as an individual as to what I really want to do. It followed up with those development talks to make sure that you knew everything about the employee and what they wanted to do, and then of course you had that supporting IT system. So it was a very interesting way of looking at this, and something that I think that everyone should maybe take a look at to see if you could incorporate something like that within your organization. There was another gentleman named David Foreman, who I did happen to hear at the Capital Institute conference that I was at as well. He's written a book called Fearless HR. It's called Driving Business Results. I highly recommend this book to anybody that has an opportunity to pick it up. David really believes that HR needs to move forward to this idea of going from the old-fashioned, perception of, well, HR, we need to make sure everybody's polite to one another, and oh no, HR is coming down the hall. The police are here, with that HR police model. Well, we're starting to see that shift a little bit, right? We have a lot of titles out there for HR business partner and L&D business partner. But what David's saying is we need to move past the politeness and the police and the partnership and move to being a player within an organization. So how do we get to move to being a player? We're going to talk about that in a minute. But some stats I wanted to share with you that I thought were very interesting was that when David took a look at some organizations that he's worked with, what he found out was that if you can increase levels of engagement within your organization, you could most likely increase operating income by about an average of 19%. Now, we've talked about if you walk into a C-suite room, a boardroom, and start talking about, hey, we need to increase engagement, and you don't have the buy-in that you have from somebody like Gary Ridge, you're just at another organization where engagement is something that they think is HR fluff and stuff, if you will. Well, if you can say, listen, if we can increase engagement, this is how it's going to help us by increasing our operating income, suddenly you've got the C-suite's attention. You've got CFOs saying, wait, you can help us increase our operating income? That's important to me. And if you're tying it into their language and what they're talking about, you're going to definitely help them. Now, on the same side of things, if you have a room full of people in senior management that are saying, hey, we don't think engagement's a big deal. Well, you can pull out some information that David Foreman shared with us and say, hey, what he also found was that decreased levels of engagement led to a decrease in operating income of 33%. Now, you can show them how employees that are not engaged actually have an impact on the business in a negative way. And that's going to lead those leaders to think about maybe we should try to find ways to engage our employees a little bit more. Moving on, David, this was some nice things to hear about, was that 20% of business success is attributed to HR professionals. That's all of us in L&D and any of our HR business partners that might be on the phone with us today as well. People costs often comprise more than 50% of all the costs in an organization. That's important to know that as talent development professionals and learning development professionals and human resource development professionals, we have a responsibility to the people because it's all about the people, and those people make up more than 50% of the costs within an organization. So let's take a look a little bit more and talk about this evolution of HR because I believe this is really important to talk about. On the left side in orange, you see the perception of HR. They're reactive, right? Somebody comes to them and they say, hey, we need you to do this. So they become an order taker and they say, okay, we'll implement this or we'll do this for you. And this happens to us in L&D as well, right? Somebody comes in and says, hey, Joe, I need a leadership program. And all of a sudden you're taking an order going, all right, well, what do you want me to do? Well, that's not the way we want to do it. We want to shift over to the right side of this and become more proactive, going around to different departments and asking them, what do you guys need? What are you trying to accomplish? Planning things for them. And instead of being just people focused, you also want to be business focused, that strategist side of things. If we move down a little bit further at the bottom, we can see retention, changing that retention idea to engagement so people don't want to leave. But I'm going to pop up a couple there and go up to the third from the bottom, problem finder to solutions provider. I was just at an organization, a large pharmaceutical organization, just a week and a half ago, and I was talking with an HR business partner there. And what she told me was that, hey, she's fairly new in her role. She's only been in this role for about a month or so. And one of the things she decided to do was be a true solutions provider. So what she has agreed to do is 3 times a week, she actually goes around and schedules a lunch with a different function, a leader in a different function, a leader in a different L&D area within the organization to just listen about what they're doing right now. What are their needs and what have they been up to? What's worked and what are they struggling with? And what she's finding after doing this within just her first month is that there's people that already have a solution for some of the problems that other functions are having, and she can help tie these things together by, hey, I think I might be able to help you out with that. And sometimes she's finding there's common problems within groups that she can help come up with a solution for everyone. It's working really well for her, and something that we should all consider is moving to this solutions provider, becoming more of a strategist by going around and planning and being proactive to others. It can really help us become a true player within the organization and not just a partner anymore. With that same thought in mind, getting from this perception that HR is there to just help with payroll and all of that kind of stuff, moving to the far right of the business results. What you want to look at here are what are the opportunities to do that. And the third one on the list in the opportunity circle is implementing the right HR levers. And that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, is some of the levers that HR can get to. Before we get that, we really have to have this moment of, I guess you'd call it self-awareness for the L&D side and the HR side. We're always asking our leaders that we do in leadership training and leadership development to be more self-aware, and we give them a lot of assessments. Well, I have a list of questions for you that maybe can help us be a little bit more self-aware. What business acumen questions should we think? Is the learning and development agenda the business's agenda? Is it the same? Are we going after the same things? What are the revenue and the cost trends over the past 3 to 5 years of the organization as a whole, not just in a certain department, but in the organization as a whole? What is revenue per employee, and how does that compare with the 3 top competitors that we have? Now, often we get so focused on looking internally, we don't even think about what the competitors of our overall organization are doing. We can talk about new product vitality index. This is a metric that's out there. It's really geared on the HR side of things, but looking at, hey, what % of our revenue is brought in from products that were brought to market just in the past 3 years? And then you'd need to think about what could we do to help improve that new product vitality index? What could we do to help improve revenue per employee? What could we do to help improve overall revenue or cost trends that we're seeing within our organization? And how can we make that trend go upward over the next 3 to 5 years? You're going to see that some of the things we're going to talk about over the next, I don't know, half an hour or so that we have left are really geared towards engagement and geared towards outcomes and geared towards trends. But one of the things you're going to need is a financial buddy. Do you have one? Do you have a financial buddy within your organization that can help you understand what the CFO is really looking for? What are the metrics that each functional area within your business has? Well, let's take a look at this a little bit further. If you don't have a financial buddy, we can talk to you a little bit about ways you can find these things out. So David reminds us that, hey, there's steps you can take. And the first step should be to break down the capabilities and competencies into KPIs, key performance indicators. This looks a little familiar to that analysis that Klaus talked about a little bit earlier, breaking down what are the capabilities and the competencies of each role and each position in our organization, and breaking those down into these, how they affect the key performance indicators at our company. He then says you need to develop some sort of assessment instrument or gather diverse data on your own strengths and weaknesses. You should pick 2 to 3 areas that you might want to work on within those weaknesses or different competencies within your organization, and develop and commit. This is one of the big things, is commit to a development plan, maybe a 6 to 8 month plan, and then assess actual progress. How is it going? How did it go after the first month and the third month and the 6th and the 9th? And if you continued your plan on, show the trend of how things might be changing as you're going into effect it and you've taken these steps. So I'm going to show you a couple tools that David recommends that we use. And the first is something called a meaningful outcome measure. A meaningful outcome measure looks at, hey, what are the outcomes of the organization as a whole? So he has a list that he's provided for us. You can see on the left, the outcomes are things like, well, our organization says we need to do something about innovation. Innovation is a value within our organization, and I've heard this a lot, that it's one of the true values at a lot of organizations, innovation. We want to be innovative at our company. Other outcomes might be improving quality or being more productive, cost savings or efficiency metrics, and even all the way down to revenue and profit. And what you then have to look at are what are the specific measures that can tell me if our organization is being innovative or not. So you find out specific measures like how many new products did we release, how many new patents, how many new NDAs if you're in the medical side of things. What are the sales from new products? And that's just the innovation example. And what you need to figure out then is what could we do on an L&D side to help improve getting new products to market, having new patents come up, sales from new products. And then the innovation side, think about this of going back to that culture side of things, is developing that culture within your organization of being an innovative culture. If no one within the organization is really listening to new ideas, do you really have an innovative culture there? So what could you do to train everyone on how to be and think more innovatively and how to accept and hear about new ideas? What kind of L&D programs can you put together to get people more on the idea of brainstorming and listening and thinking out of the box, if you will? Now, if you don't have a form like this that has all of this stuff filled in, you can use a simple template, and if you want to, you can email me or connect with me on LinkedIn after this webinar, and I can send you out some blank templates. One might look something like this, where you have a list of functions, and then you have to figure out who is the person accountable for that, and then you go have a quick visit with that person. Who's in charge of marketing? And then you ask them, hey, what are your leading indicators? What key performance indicators are you responsible for? And then ask them, what are the results or outcomes you need to achieve? From there, you can say, okay, if they're trying to achieve these outcomes, how can I help them go ahead and do that? And maybe it's through an incentive plan, or maybe it's through a variety of other ways that you can go through that. Just making sure that that incentive plan matches up with the incentive you have. So I'll give you an example of that on the sales side of things. Sales incentive plans are often based on overall sales, right? You sold something, you get a percentage of that in a commission. Well, what if my organization is much more concerned about profit than they are about overall sales revenue? Perhaps I should be rewarding my sales employees on a sales incentive that's based on the profit of the sale as opposed to the overall sale itself. So align your incentives with what the outcome in the organization is trying to achieve. That's something you can look at on the incentive side. Train and develop and do programs that actually pull those types of things out for the participants that are in that program, and really get them the understanding of how profit affects an organization when you go through that. The next one is on the strengths and weaknesses side of things. Okay, so this is a chart that's been developed, is usually used in the strategy side. If we go back to Michael Porter, one of the first steps he says is in an industry, you should look at what are the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities within an organization. Well, this is a slightly different take on that. It's just using strengths and weaknesses and trends. So when you look at trends, look at what are the trends in learning and development, what's new, and what are other organizations doing out there that might impact my industry or my organization. So list all those trends that you can find within the L&D space and the HR space. Then look at what are our strengths within our organization and look at what are our weaknesses. Now, taking this to another level, you could actually compare and do a SWOT analysis, not just on your company, but with your competitors as well, so that you can see, hey, are they training and learning better over at another organization? Are they doing different types of programs than we're doing? Maybe they do a business acumen program at another organization that we don't do here at our organization. Find those things out and then figure out what are your weaknesses. Those are those 2 or 3 areas that you want to work on and develop, and then you go ahead and work on implementing a new L&D program that can actually help out with those areas. If you need a SWOT template, again, you can email me or give me a call or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to send you a blank template like this that you can use to conduct this SWOT analysis on your L&D space or your HR space as well. Now, one of the biggest questions that we kind of have to ask ourselves in the HR space is, when we go through all of this, is what can we do in HR or L&D that can really help the departments meet these measures? That's that learning, that moment again for us of self-awareness is, yeah, we can critique all these areas, but we really have to decide and determine what can we do to help them meet their measures, because that's our job, is to help them meet their goals and meet the organization's goals as a whole. There was an article that was published last September by a gentleman named Dr. John Sullivan that I wanted to share some things with you. I think these were really important as far as the impacts that HR must have, that CEOs want. And I've heard a lot of these when I've talked to senior leaders at organizations, is they really want programs that their L&D department is setting up to help achieve these certain outcomes. So he talked about a list of the first one, accept accountability for improving people management results. Then he moved on to talking about demand a shift to database decision making. So are we just creating a program, a learning and development program within our organization because we think that it's something that's useful within the organization, or did we really go and do our research and find out that, hey, this is needed in a training program or a learning program as something that can make an impact on that? Did we do that research, or is it just this gut instinct? And what he's saying is that you need to shift it to being that it's, hey, there's some basis to this. I have some data that shows that this program is valuable and that we need to make it happen. Measure and increase workforce productivity. Make managers accountable for great people management. Build a competitive advantage. Hey, we've seen that before just about 10 or 15 minutes ago. Expect reporting on continuous improvement. Measure quality and error rates in people management programs, and then calculate your ROI. Now, I'm not going to go through each one of these in depth. I can send you a link to this article if you want to, but I'm going to go through a few of them that I thought were fairly important that we should think about. Measuring and increasing workforce productivity. So workforce productivity really looks at the average revenue per employee. Well, this is a ratio or a calculation that one is going to have to make. And the first thing I want to talk about when we're looking at business outcomes and metrics that are out there is just remember this. Every business outcome or metric is really just a math calculation. And most of them are division or multiplication problems. So we learned those things when we were in grammar school, how to do division and multiplication. We just need to know what's the numerator and what's the denominator to calculate the number. So in this case, workforce productivity is revenue divided by number of employees. Now, I bet a lot of you are either using this or have an HR friend within your organization or colleague that are using this exact metric. The interesting thing about this is that most of the time, when we look at these metrics, we have to know what levers to pull, right? And most of the time, if we think of a division problem, I can take the numerator, which is revenue, and I can find a way to increase that, or I can take the denominator, that's the number of employees, and decrease that. Because if I decrease my denominator, I have a smaller number divided into a big number, which makes my workforce productivity number look better. So a lot of people will go right to this number of employees and say, we need to cut employees so that we can show a higher workforce productivity. Yeah, that's great, but that's not what our job is, right? We're all in the L&D space, in the HR space, the people space. On occasion, there's people that need to be cut. We can be honest about that, but most of the time we need to develop people and help them grow. So where we really should focus on is the numerator and what we could do to help with revenue side of things. And what we could do to help with revenue is to actually develop our employees, maybe help them feel like it's okay to be more innovative, or maybe just give them the knowledge that they need to change those behaviors so they can have an impact on a number like revenue. There's a deeper calculation you could get into for this. It's a little bit more complicated, but it's revenue per labor dollar spent is where you would look for on this one. And that you might have to find some calculations on, hey, what is our labor cost on this? And you can go ahead and divide that out, revenue divided by total labor cost. Now, I can tell you something. If you go in and you can show an organization and show a C-suite or show a bunch of leaders how you think your L&D program or what you're doing in HR can actually help increase the revenue within your organization, and you can show them that's going to give us a bigger workforce productivity number, you're going to get a good response from them. They're going to be impressed, and they're going to want to hear more about what you could do. The key is you have to know what levers you could pull. What levers do I pull to help increase revenue? And that can happen by you being a player and a partner and going around and learning more about all the different functions within your organization. Number 5 on the list that Dr. Sullivan had was building a competitive advantage. We've already talked about this a little bit, but some of the things you can do here are monitoring the talent results and the approaches of a major talent competitor. So we always look internally, and even what we talked about earlier, building advantage, looked at us internally, but we have to know if we have a competitive advantage by looking at our competition and what they're doing. So do that SWOT analysis that we talked about earlier, but don't just do it on your own organization, do it on your competition as well. And then you have to ask yourself, ensure that what we do in talent is better in every important area than what they do. Compare those SWOT analysis and make sure that what you're doing is better than what they're doing at their organization as well. Number 6 on Dr. Sullivan's list was reporting on continuous improvement. I mentioned this just a little bit earlier, and what we talked about was trending, right? Show trends. When you're talking to a group of managers, they're very familiar with hearing trends. Hey, how did our quarter do over last year? How did this quarter do over the previous quarter? They want to talk about trending. So things that you can look at with trends within the L&D and the HR space are, what are the quality of the hires? What is the workforce productivity trend? What's the turnover rate of our top performers? How is that trend going up or down? What's the rate of innovation at our company? The number of new products coming out? What's the learning and operational speed of the organization? And show the trend. Show how the trend is changing over time. And you could do that with a quarterly, a yearly, a 3-year, a 5-year. And these outcomes that you're showing trends on don't just have to be these ones that you see here. They can be any of those off of that measurable outcomes chart that we talked about a little bit earlier. The key is to show that you're trending upward. Now, if you're not trending upward, that's okay. What you have to do then, and what every upward, what could we do to change that and make that happen? So don't be scared if your trends are showing downward. It gives you the opportunity to have a plan and show that you have a plan moving forward. The last one on Dr. Sullivan's list was calculating your ROI. So every department is really expected to produce a positive ROI within an organization. And this is what CEOs really want to see is, are we getting a return on any investment we make in our organization? And one of the problems we typically have as talent leaders is when we go to calculate our ROI, we usually focus on the cost side of things, right? How much did it cost me to do this program? Well, I had to have space, so we had to go get some rooms at a hotel. We had to fly people in. We had to bring a subject matter expert in to talk to them about this specific thing, and we list all of our costs. What we forget to do is and ignore is that other side of the equation. What was the business impact of the investment that we made? So how did the program that we just put everyone through, how did that affect the business side of things? Was there a change in revenue? Was there a change in us being more profitable from that? Is this something you can find out the next day? Heck no. You're going to have to take a little bit of time, and you're going to have to go to the leaders of each of the different functional areas and find out, are they trending in a different direction? Now, what you want to do is find out. Don't just say, oh yeah, our profit's getting better. Find out how much the profit improved by. Did the profit drop by, or our profit go up by, let's say, I don't know, $100,000, okay? We'll just use that as a round number. Our profit went up by $100,000 in the last 6 months based on these things that the behaviors that the people you trained are doing differently. So now you can say, all right, I know we made $100,000 now more in profit. What was my cost to do that? Now add up all that stuff, the cost of the room and the cost of the subject matter expert and all those costs, and compare them. Did you make more than your investment? So don't forget that other side is showing that you can make more. Now, there's another step to this, another step. And that next step is the average rate of return. Now, if you sit in a room with a CEO and a CFO, they know that if they don't do anything, and they have this pile of money sitting there, that they can just invest it somewhere and probably get a, 7 to 10% return on their money. So every organization has this idea of what is the average rate of return at our organization. What you need to know at your company is what is the average rate of return. You want your ROI to be higher than that average rate of return. So when you go in and sit down with the management team and you say, all right, the business impact that our training program or our learning program had, or that our HR implementation had, showed us an ROI of 12%, and that's higher than the average rate of return we would expect at our organization, you now have turned some heads, and they realize that, hey, you understand business a little bit and what it's all about within our organization, that we're trying to make a business impact. So know that average rate of return and compare your ROI to the rate of return at your organization. When you calculate your ROI, this is really interesting to me, is that HR should actually have a higher ROI than finance, operations, and even production. Why is that? Well, think about it. The very first couple slides I showed you said that 50% of all the costs in a company are on the people side. And that's what we're working with here in HR, and what we're working with in L&D is the people. So our ROI should actually be higher than just about any other group within the organization. And we should have an impact on the ROI in every one of these groups. All right, let's talk about those softer skills for just a few minutes. Now, we at Capstan do a lot in the leadership development space, so I thought I would share with you some of the ways that we help and talk with our clients about measuring return on investment in a leadership development program. So one of the things you could do is look at the number of potentials in the program who were actually promoted. Okay, so we put 20 people through a year in our leadership development program. How many of those people were promoted? And then you can break that down into promotions over time periods. Was there a new promotion every quarter, every year? How many promotions were made per quarter and per year on our out of our talent pool that we had put through this program? And then trended over time. Each quarter we saw more and more people getting promoted. Or if it's not promotions, maybe it's just new project assignments over time periods as well. So you can use promotions from that leadership program, or you can use project assignments over time as well. You want to then do what we had just talked about, which is how much money was invested in that development compared to the time to promotion. And then look at how much money was invested in that development compared to the money you saved from not hiring outside. We know there's statistics out there that tell us how much it costs to hire a brand new employee from the outside. And the more senior level that new hire is, the more the cost is. So compare how much you spent on developing that one future leader that got promoted to what it would cost you to bring in a whole new leader from outside the organization, and do that comparison. Another thing you can measure is time to fill vacancies in leadership roles. We do know that if you go outside of the organization, it could take a while to fill a role. And when a role is empty, especially in management and in leadership, we know there's productivity loss within those different functional areas, depending on what that role is that's missing at that point in time. So if you can fill vacancies faster in these leadership roles because of your leadership development pool that you've now put in place, that's going to help save money in the organization. So calculate, what is the cost of having a vacant spot? Go talk to someone in HR, go talk to someone in that business unit and find that out. And then compare, all right, now we've been able to fill these roles even faster because we have somebody in place that's ready to go and move up into that, and show them the difference in the cost there. So what is the cost to fill vacancies in leadership roles? Compare it and trend it again. Show how you've changed that. Before we implemented this leadership program, this was our cost to fill vacancies in leadership roles. Since we've implemented it, this is our new cost. And now that we've had it in place for 3 years and 5 years, our cost trend has changed even more. So compare and trend within your organization. You can also look at tenure at a company. This talks a little bit about retention, but ties into that same basic thing. Compare those who've been through a program at your organization, whether it's leadership development or other training or learning programs within there, to those that have not been through there, and figure out who stayed at the company longer. Now, if I look at this, SHRM says that basically replacing a salaried employee costs 6 to 9 months average on salary. So look at that. A manager making $100,000 a year could cost us $60,000 to $90,000 to replace in recruiting and training expenses. And some people predict that the cost is even more when you get up to an executive level employee, all the way up to 2 times their annual salary. So having that pool of well-developed candidates to move into that role is going to help you, but also keeping candidates within your organization and employees within your organization, having their tenure be longer because they were in a program and feel like they're more engaged within your organization, is going to help save money. And once again, show the difference in not having to replace employees because they're engaged and they want to stay. You can look at the number of employees promoted under new leaders. So you have that old leadership model, right? That old time one where they say, yeah, I want to make sure I have as many people under me as I can, and I'm not going to really help foster growth. Well, the new strong leaders that are out there are saying, no, I want to foster growth on my team. I want to sponsor and send people to these learning and development programs when I hear about them. I want to have people prepared to replace me for when I move up, so someone can jump right in. That's the new model of leadership. But you do need to take into account in this area, depending on the size of your company, are there opportunities when you look at this new number of employees promoted under leaders? I mean, if you're a small company, there may not be as many opportunities. What you can create from this is something that looks like a family tree, if you will. It reminds me of a coaching tree. So I'm a big football fan. I love watching football on Sundays. I can't wait. The draft is tomorrow night. I'm hoping the Bears maybe pull a quarterback if we can, but hey, we'll see. But anyway, it reminds me of a coaching tree. And there's a coach from back in the 1980s, Bill Walsh. He was a coach for the 49ers. He was the one that developed this West Coast high passing offense that we see. And he had a bunch of assistant coaches under him, Mike Holmgren and Ray Rhodes and several others. And what happened was he gave these guys the opportunity to really learn and understand this offense that he was running, and gave them the opportunity, that the fact that they became their own head coaches at other NFL football teams that were out there. Well, those coaches learned from Bill about the opportunities that they were given. They gave their assistant coaches the same opportunities. And what we found was that, looking at this coaching tree, there's about 25, 27 different head coaches on here. Do you know how many NFL teams there are? There's only 32. 32 NFL teams out there. And Bill Walsh was able to help develop 27 head coaching candidates out there for the NFL, just because he provided that area for leadership. So develop your own coaching tree, your own leadership tree within your organization. So to recap some of the stuff we've talked about today, engagement, what can you do to improve it? Because that leads to productivity and that leads to a business outcome. So the questions you have to ask yourself are, what can you do to improve the E, the engagement, or the P, the productivity, to get a better business outcome, and then translate that business outcome to some sort of number that you can share with the C-suite or the upper management at your company. Create a competitive advantage and use that word when you're talking with leaders, and do it through the talent development side of things. Determine meaningful outcome measures for functions, and then also look at how you can help them. It's good to just know the meaningful outcome measures, but what can you do to impact them is the key. And then you can conduct that SWOT analysis internally and externally and ask yourself that question of, what do you do better than they do? And what can we improve upon? Showing trends is a great way to get attention from that C-suite and that upper management team, expecting continuous improvement and showing them continuous improvement. But remember, it's okay to not always have improvement as long as you have a plan as to what you're going to do to fix that. So don't be cautious to go in and say, well, we had a bump in the road here, but we're going to do this to make that change and fix it. Calculating your ROI was the last thing we've been talking about. And remember to look at, is it higher than the average rate of return? And is it higher than the other functions within your business area? So those are the reflection points that we have for you today. That was everything that we really talked about and chatted about. But what I can't stress enough is you really need to get the chance to learn about the business within your company. Now, we at CAPSIM do offer these business acumen workshops specifically for HR and L&D professionals to come to. We have one coming up in June, and you're all invited to attend. It's a 2-day workshop, and for everybody that attended today, we're offering it free to them. You can go to our website at capsim.com, and you'll receive actually 15 recertification credit hours for coming to that. So we wanted to offer that to all of you today. If anyone has any, wants to hear a little bit more, they can contact our learning program consultant, Kirsten DeBrouwer. You can find her information on our website as well and reach out to her, or you can go to our website at corporatecapsim.com. I want to open up some time for questions for you, but one of the questions you may be asking was, Joe, you told this story at the beginning about your daughter, with the school she was going to choose. So while you're thinking of some questions, I'll tell you what happened. Well, she chose to go to SLU. You want to know why she chose it? Because I laid out for her the idea of which culture did you really fit into better. And she said, Dad, actually, if I look at it, and when I went back and visited, she went back down to SLU a second time, she realized that that culture fit her better. So that was one thing. But then we did this whole SWOT analysis almost. It was very similar to that. What are the strengths of the one school versus the other? What are the weaknesses of the one school versus the other? And we laid that out, and then we looked at that business outcome side, those numbers, and we said, all right, this is the cost of the two schools. This is the scholarship information and the grants that they're offering at each one. Which one is a better deal? And when she found out that the money she was going to have to lay out on a student loan after college was minimal, she said, hey, no big deal. I think I know my choice. The culture fit. She knew the strengths were not that different than the weaknesses of the other school, and she realized that the outcome side and the business measurement side wasn't going to be bad, so she chose SLU. So all the stuff we just talked about today you can use in your personal life as well. So I'll hang tight with any questions that you might have. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to an email from a CAPSIM person. Probably Kirsten DeBrouwer will send you an email with your HRCI credit code number. Oh, we've got a question that just popped in. If I was to focus on one business outcome, what should it be? So my answer to that is it depends. So what we talked about here today was that measurable outcome chart. Well, what it depends on is which outcome is most important to your organization. So I hate to answer questions that way, but every organization is different and everybody has different business outcomes they're looking for. So what you need to do is find out which one is most important to your organization, and that's the one that you should focus on, whether it's innovation or profitability or those kind of things. And you can look at a top 3 if you had to from that point on. All right, well, I want to thank everybody for attending. I appreciate your time. It was great presenting all this information to you. If you want to hear more, you can once again go and visit Kirsten DeBrouwer at capstan.com. Oh, wait, we've got another question. What is the best way to get senior leadership to buy in for employee engagement? Well, I'll tell you what, I presented some information a little bit earlier, and I really like this idea, is if you look at the information we talked about that David Foreman put forth in the book Fearless HR, he showed us that if you have low engagement, you actually get a decrease in operating income within your organization, because low engagement leads to low productivity. Low productivity would lead to low revenue, which leads to low operating income because our costs might be higher. Employees aren't being as efficient as they can. So what you want to talk about is that having highly engaged employees within your organization, they're going to come into work and find a way to be more productive within your organization. And that productivity leads to a higher revenue. It leads to having people that are more cautious and conscious of actually finding a way to reduce efficiencies or increase efficiencies to reduce costs at your organization. So I would go in and lead with that and talk about engaged employees lead to workforce productivity. High engagement, high productivity leads to business outcome. I hope that helps out with that question for you a little bit. All right, thank you everybody. I appreciate the time. If you have any other questions, please reach out to myself, Joe Lavigny at capstan.com. Reach out to Kirsten DeBrouwer at capstan.com. We'd be happy to answer anything we can for you. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your week.